breaching Active Directory. Before we can exploit AD misconfigurations for privilege escalation, lateral movements, and goal execution, you need initial access first. You need to acquire an initial set of valid AD credentials. Due to the number of AD services and features, the attack surface for gaining an initial set of AD credentials is usually significant. In this room, we'll discover several avenues, but this is by no means an exhaustive list. When looking for the first set of credentials, we don't focus on the permissions associated with the account, thus even a low-privileged account would be sufficient. We're just looking for a way to authenticate to AD, allowing us to do further enumeration of the Active Directory itself. So the learning objectives here is going to be NTLM authenticated services, LDAP bind credentials, authentication relays, Microsoft deployment toolkits, and configuration files. We can use these techniques on a security assessment either by targeting systems of an organization that are internet facing or by implanting a rogue device on the organization's network. It's asking us to connect to the network here, and we'll start by resolving DNS here. So if you're using the web-based attack box, you'll be connected to the network automatically. You can verify this, blah, blah, blah. We still need to configure DNS. Windows Network uses DNS to resolve host names to IPs. Throughout this network, DNS will be used for the tasks. You'll have to configure DNS on the host on which you're running the VPN. In order to configure our DNS, we'll run the following command: systemd resolve interface breach AD. So let's go ahead and start that. Scrolling down, it's just asking us to submit that we've completed the basics of the Active Directory room before this, as well as connected and configured DNS, and we'll actually connect and configure DNS in a minute here. We will take a look at task 2, OSINT and phishing, and then we'll jump into the actual box. Moving forward, let's take a look at OSINT and phishing. Now, I did a small little teaser on OSINT, posted on the channel as well. Feel free to check that out. However, in this case, we're going to be taking a look at OSINT in a practical matter. Two popular methods for gaining access to the first set of AD credentials is open source intelligence, OSINT, and phishing. We will only briefly mention the two methods here as they are already covered in more depth rooms, and we can take a look at those later on. OSINT is used to discover information that has been publicly disclosed. In terms of AD credentials, this can happen for several reasons, such as users who ask questions on public forums such as Stack Overflow, but disclose sensitive information such as their credentials in question, or maybe proprietary code for the company, and forget to scrub information of that. Developers that upload scripts to services such as GitHub with credentials hard-coded. This is similar to the first. Credentials being disclosed in past breaches since employees use their work accounts to sign up for other external websites. Websites such as Have I Been Pwned and Dehashed provide excellent platforms to determine if someone's information. Websites such as Have I Been Pwned and Dehashed provide excellent platforms to determine if someone's information, such as work email, was ever involved in a publicly known data breach. By using OSINT techniques, it may be possible to recover publicly disclosed credentials. If we're lucky enough to find credentials, we'll still need a way to find and test if they're valid, since OSINT information can be outdated. In task 3, we'll talk about NTLM authenticated services, which may provide an excellent avenue to test credentials to see if they're still valid. Here is a little snippet on phishing. Phishing is another excellent method to breach AD. Phishing usually entices users to either provide their credentials on a malicious web page or ask them to run a specific application that would install a remote access Trojan in the background. This is a prevalent method since rats would execute in their user's context, immediately allowing you to impersonate the user's AD account. This is why phishing is such a big topic for both red and blue teams. Now, of course, we focus heavily on red team here in this channel because that is the avenue that I like to work in. We do dabble in a little bit of blue team just to see how they're defending from attacks and things of that nature. But anyway, moving forward, or NTLM and Net NTLM, authenticated services. New Technology LAN Manager NTLM is the suite of the security protocols used to authenticate users' identity in AD. NTLM can be used for authentication by using a challenge response based scheme called Net NTLM. Authentication mechanism is heavily used by services on a network. However, services that use Net NTLM can also be exposed to the internet. The following are some of the popular examples. Here we have internally hosted exchanged emails that expose Outlook on a login portal, remote desktop RDP services exposed to the internet, expose VPN endpoints, and web applications that are internet facing and make use of NTLM. Here's a little diagram as well where we can see user requests access, server sends challenge, client sends response. That response is then sent to the domain controller. The domain controller compares challenge and response for authentication, then authenticates the user. Now you may be asking yourself, why does any of this matter? This matters because we're going to use this to brute force login. As mentioned in Task 2, these exposed services provide an excellent location to test credentials discovered using other venues. However, these services can also be used directly in an attempt to recover an initial set of valid AD credentials. We could perhaps try to use these for brute force attacks if we recovered information such as valid email addresses during our initial red team recon. Since most AD environments have lockout configured, we won't be able to run in a full brute force attack. Instead, we need to perform a password spraying attack. Instead of trying multiple different passwords, which may trigger the account lockout mechanism, we choose and use one password and attempt to authenticate with all the usernames we have acquired. However, it should be noted that these types of attacks can be detected due to the amount of failed authentication attempts we will generate. So this is basically going to show up in a log of some sort. You have been provided with a list of usernames discovered during a red team OSINT exercise. The OSINT exercise also indicated the organization's initial onboarding password, which seems to be ChangeMe123. Although users should always change their initial password, we know that users often forget. We'll be using a custom developed script to stage a password spraying attack against the web application hosted at this URL, ntlmauth.za.tryhackme.com. Navigating to this URL prompts us to log in with the credentials. Let's go ahead and take. Alright, we could use Hydra to assist with the password spraying attack. However, it's often better to script up these type of attacks ourselves, which allow more control of the process. A Python script has been provided here in the task files, and we can use this for the password spraying attack. So define password spray here, print starting password spray attack, and then it's going to basically request users that we input and start hitting user plus password. So let's go ahead and try that. We'll navigate to our command prompt and our Linux box finally. And we'll begin with typing in systemd resolve -- interface breach AD. Breach AD in this case is actually the interface that we're on, or so if you do a ifconfig instead of your IP, we're just using the domain name here. And then we're gonna set DNS to the THM server. So we'll set the domain to za.tryhackme.com. And we'll do ns lookup followed by the domain to make sure that we've correctly configured DNS. Sometimes on these boxes it can take a minute. You may have to reset the box, start the network, try again. It's very finicky. As you can see here, connection timed out, no servers could be reached. Let's try it again here. One last time, and we managed to resolve DNS. So non-authoritative user, name thmdc.za.tryhackme.com, followed by the IP address 10.200.101. Now we can navigate to the login portal at the NTLM auth. Now we can navigate to the login portal at ntlmauth.za.tryhackme and will actually be allowed access. Now if you try to do that without resolving DNS, you won't be able to even get this prompt here. So the site's asking us to log in, and as previously mentioned, they did provide a password of ChangeMe123. Pretty much, they did provide a password of ChangeMe123. They did provide a password of ChangeMe123, simulating kind of like a onboarding for employees to an organization that have forgotten to change their password. So we'll use that and take advantage of that when we perform this brute force attack on the login here. Now at this point you're going to need to change directory, CD into rooms, breaching AD. This will be task 3. We'll ls, list the files and directory. We're provided with ntlm password spray.py, the zip for the password sprayer, and usernames.txt. Now, of course, if the file is zipped, you can unzip it. You'll be provided with the same thing here. And we're going to take a look at the Python password spray script here. So we'll implement that, and we'll do -u for usernames. We'll do usernames.txt. This is the file that has been provided to us with a list of usernames. The file is that's the file. We'll do za.tryhackme.com. And password we're going to be using is ChangeMe123 for each user, and then we type in the login portal that we're attacking. Immediately we get some results back. Immediately we get some results back. Starting password spray using the attack following ChangeMe123. And failed login, username Anthony, failed login Samantha. So basically here's all the users. Valid credential pair found, username holly.powell, password ChangeMe123. Valid credential found, username heather.smith. Valid credential pair found, username Gordon Stevens. Okay, so we have a few here. Valid credential for Georgina as well. So we've successfully used the Python script to brute force the login for the users. Of course, it's very trivial when you're provided with the password already, but this lab has been set up with that in mind, and is basically just attempting to show us how services work in Active Directory versus having us do a full penetration test, get credentials, and then move into Active Directory. Now that we've cracked the passwords, we can take a look at the questions here. What is the name of the challenge response authentication mechanism that uses NTLM? That's net NTLM. What is the username of the third valid credential pair found? That would be Gordon Stevens. How many valid credential pairs were found by using the spraying script? That would be 4. Last question. What is the message displayed by the web application when authenticating with a valid credential pair? Let's take a look. So we navigate to the NTLM auth login, and we'll use some credentials here to log in. We'll use George.Stevens. Alright, so let's go to the login portal here that's been provided to us, the NTLM auth.ca.tryhackme.com. And we'll use the Gordon.Stevens username to log in. We'll use the change me password, and we get hello world once we log in. Alright, looks like we found the answer to the last question here. What is the message displayed? Hello world. In the next video, we'll take a look at the task 4.